Carlis McDerment Jr. is deeply concerned about the effects of drugs on individuals and the effects and cost of drug prohibition on society. McDerment has spent the last 9 years as a deputy sheriff for the Fairfield County, Ohio Sheriff's Office. During this time, working in the jail and while on patrol, he saw firsthand that our drug policies are catastrophic failures on many levels: public safety, police safety, economic, and targeting sick people with health problems. McDerment stresses that Prohibition's financial costs have been astounding. McDerment is passionate about helping society see the whole picture. Drug prohibition is a bad policy, wrecking lives, the nation, and creating more problems than it attempts to solve. In his spare time, Carlis enjoys playing guitar, specifically the blues and rock. He also enjoys art, gardening, hiking, and fishing. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Carlis McDerment.
Thank you, guys. I'm glad to be here today. This is a nice little group to stand in front of and speak in front of today. Tell you a little bit. Rose kind of introduced me. My name is Carlis McDerment. I'm a former deputy sheriff of Fairfield County Sheriff's Office. I worked there for 11 years before being fired because of my speaking out on the war on drugs. I got my job back through arbitration. And then decided to go ahead and resign to take care of my mother, who has dementia, and that's where I'm kind of at now. I've been a lead speaker for the last 3 years. I'm also the president of Central Ohio Normal. I'm also the vice president of the Ohio Rights Group, which is a medical marijuana group. We have a petition out trying to get medical marijuana and hemp legalized in the state, especially medical marijuana for all the sick patients out there that really need it. LEAP started in 2002, a 501(c) nonprofit organization. It was started by 5 police officers who felt the war on drugs is an absolute and total failure. And they set out to start this with, like I said, 5 officers. It's led into being over 100,000 members. And just in the last when I joined, it was 20,000 members, and that was about 4 years ago. Now we've got over 100,000 members. The war on drugs. What is it? Does anybody in this room believe the war on drugs works? Nobody? Right. Then why do we keep going? That's
Profitable?
Yeah, it's profitable right there. I think you said it right there. It's all about greed. Okay, the criminal justice system, anybody believes that the criminal justice system is out here to help everybody, I'm only here to tell you, it's out here to rip you off. That's exactly what I've seen in 11 years of being a police officer. What good does any of this stuff do for anyone as far as when it comes to drug policies and what we're doing with drug addicts is absolutely ridiculous. The drug courts in this state do not work. They actually lead to people's deaths. And just to tell you about the war on drugs, we've been doing this for almost 100 years, since 1914 with the Harrison Act, which made cocaine and heroin illegal. And then in 1937 with the Marijuana Tax Act, basically made marijuana illegal. And that was all based on greed and racism. Okay? We've spent over close to 60, some people say we spent $61 billion on the war on drugs. Some say it's now over $100 billion on the war on drugs. Okay, we've got, it's basically a twofold problem in America. You have drug addiction on one hand, and the other hand you have what we call the drug violence in the drug marketplace, and who's controlling the drug marketplace. Drug addiction can only be solved and fixed by 4 things, and that's family, the educational system, the medical system, and clergy, if you so to speak. If people want to go to church and get, any counseling from their churches and whatnot. The other side of that is who's controlling the drug marketplace, which are terrorists, cartel members, your Mexican cartels, and your street gangs. Okay, this is where all your violence stems from. There's over 40,000 people in Mexico in the last 5 years who have been murdered, most of the beheadings by these 4 drug cartels that are running the Mexican drug trade. Okay? So So you've got that going on. Then you've got the government, our own government's involvement in this. And we have poppy fields in Afghanistan, and there's poppy fields in Iraq and Iran. Where's our troops stationed at? They're over there right now, and guess what we're doing? Guarding those poppy fields so that little farmer over there can make his living. And our objective, and this has been on CNN, our objective is not to mess with them and mess with their crops or anything like that, which in my mind, if you wanted to wipe out drugs, and wouldn't you start by bombing those fields and getting rid of those fields? But no, instead they let that farmer over there make his living, which he's making that to give the money back to who? He's getting paid by the terrorists. Okay? When our troops in there and guard the fields and let this happen, it's all been documented on TV. CNN's done reports on it. Rally Vera's done reports on it. If you go to Infowars.com with Alex Jones, they've done reports on this and showed video of this happening, spoke to the troops over there where this is happening. Then they fly this stuff into the United States, Mexico or the United States. The raw opium, make heroin down in Mexico with it, and bring it up into the United States. So our government's already involved in this and letting this happen. If you remember here in 2011, we had a thing called the Fast and Furious gun program where the guns came out of Arizona. They let the Mexican cartel members come into Mexico, or into Arizona, I mean, and buy guns to take back across the border, okay, into Mexico. Those guns that they bought here legally in the United States filtered back into the United States, into Chicago, Miami, and all these other places. So here our own government is kind of funding and supporting this war on drugs. All this stuff has been documented. It's been in the news. There's nothing I'm standing up here saying that's not, you can't look up for yourselves and see. But the next step of that equation is you've got the banks' involvement. Who's laundering this money? Well, your banks are. Okay? They've been in the news also. Do those folks get in trouble? No. There's not any executive from any bank that's really got in trouble for doing any of this. Okay? And here's the thing of it, as a police officer, me, working on the streets for 11 years, you want me to go out and arrest some kid for doing heroin? When we're allowing this stuff in and allowing this stuff to happen. And I'm going to take that kid and I'm going to send him and give him a felony charge based on what he's going to get now with his life. Okay? How's he going to get a job? This is a sick individual. Okay? Somebody that needs drug counseling, needs help, and instead we give them a felony charge, we put them through this program. And here's the thing, most of these people don't want to be on drugs. They like being on drugs. Why? Because why do people get high? Two reasons. To get rid of pain and physical pain or mental pain. To feel good. What's wrong with feeling good? Absolutely nothing. Okay? So we go on and we incarcerate these folks, and it goes back to the alcohol prohibition of the 1920s. What happened then? We went after the bootleggers. We didn't go after the individuals. In war on drugs, we go after the individuals who were doing these drugs. This is ridiculous, along with the drug dealers and stuff. And it just doesn't, the system doesn't work. The only thing that works is ending prohibition, period. That way you get rid of the drug marketplace and the violence. How can you regulate and you control these drugs? When we talk about heroin is no different. Chemical structure is almost exactly the same as OxyContin. Is OxyContin not legal? I'm sure it's legal. It's a Schedule II narcotic. Cocaine. It's a Schedule II also. Okay? We've got methamphetamine. Adderall is the same chemical structure, and how many kids out there doing Adderall? Tons of them. How many prescribed by their doctors? Regulation and control. We can use heroin as a real medicine. It has medicinal value. It's not a Schedule I as it's listed. And same with the methamphetamine. Would I want to use methamphetamine as a drug to help people? Probably not, with the structures and stuff that go into it. But there's other ways of making it useful in a medical setting. But the whole thing of it is, why are we doing this? If you do something over and over and over and over and it doesn't work, what's the use in doing it? It's kind of ridiculous. My experience as a deputy, for 11 years, I've seen a revolving door of people coming in and out of jail. We started, now I'll give you an example. And when I started in 2004 at Fairfield County Sheriff's Office, we had at any one time probably 12 to 15 women in jail. I'll use the women as an example so you can see how the population rose. By the time I left last year, we had almost 80 women in jail for drug offenses. Okay, so the answer is, and this is what the sheriffs and the police chiefs in the state think throughout the country, that if we keep spending money on law enforcement and we keep doing these drug interdiction units, and we go out here and bust these folks, and we arrest them, and we put them in jail, now we've overcrowded our jails, same as we did in alcohol prohibition in the 1920s, went out and we had all this excess crime that happened because of alcohol prohibition. Guess what? Jail population went up then, it goes up now. So the more we spend on it, the more the population in jail goes up, and it costs us more and more money, and more lives are destroyed. And like I say, I've seen this time in a revolving door, the same people over and over and over. In the court system, I'll give you an example. The court system, they want to put them in a drug treatment program. How many kids have died from being in these drug courts and these drug treatment programs? And you go to drug court, you're to be off drugs. You're going to take a heroin addict and take them off drugs is absolutely ridiculous. They try to put them on Suboxone and these other drugs. Well, why not just use heroin and wean them off heroin with heroin? It would be a lot simpler to go to a doctor to get your drugs and then to a drug dealer. You got a clean product, okay? You got clean needles. Your hepatitis rate goes down. Your HIV goes down, your staph infections go down, your crime rate goes down. This is what they've done in Amsterdam and places like this with allotment programs. They work. And again, your jail population. It's a revolving door. Your drug courts, this thing goes on. And what causes the deaths is when you take a kid off drugs and they're used to shooting, say, 1 milligram of heroin, and then they're off of it for a while, and then they come back and they go through the drug court and they get out and they're out of jail. And you got this little freedom before they got to go back and see the probation officer. They get to go shoot up. And they're using that same 1 milligram that they was used to using. Guess what? It kills them. Okay? And that's where your drug deaths come in from drug courts. Drug courts don't work. Here's the other part of that. This is a money-making racket for the courts. Okay? Drug testing, money-making racket. Okay? Anybody that's arrested on, let's say you get arrested on a simple theft and you bond out of jail tonight, guess what's going to happen to you? Now when you sign that piece of paper from a recognizance bond, and you're now going to report to a probation officer. Once you report to that probation officer, the first thing they're going to do is start drug testing you. Guess what? They're making money off each drug test that they get, and they charge you for that drug test. So if you're found guilty, you put on probation, then you go the whole next year paying for that drug test, paying every time you go back into that court system. For what? Why does the court care if you're on drugs or not? If you stole something, the issue should be not if you're on why you're on drugs. And did that cause the problem? No. The problem should be what you stole, what you took, what you did, how you broke the law. Nowhere in the Ohio revised codes does it say a judge has the right to tell people to get on Suboxone or any of these other drugs to get people off. The court system is not set up to do this and to take care of people who are sick. That's medical, So if I was a judge and somebody come to me, and I had somebody stand in front of me that was guilty of a certain crime, and they told me they had a drug problem, I'm like, fine. We're going to deal with what you stole today, and you go see a doctor because I don't care about it. That's what, if I was a judge, that would be the whole thing. It's on you. There's agencies in place through the government to take care of that kind of thing, and you can get your help that you need. But the drug problems and the criminal justice system, they don't work together. We're not mental health professionals, okay? We're lawyers and police officers, basically. And we're not mental health professionals, we're not doctors. So that end of it's why it doesn't work. We talk about legalizing drugs, you have to think back to, people say, well, you can't legalize all these drugs, that's awful. You create all kinds of problems. No, you wouldn't. You regulate, you control. Like I say, take and send these folks, they would get drugs from either allotment programs, and these allotment programs, we know who they were, we could get them off drugs. That would be the whole idea, you give them treatment. That's better than going to a back alley getting it from a drug dealer, okay? Which, guess what? How many kids went out there to these back alleys to drug dealers and got killed and robbed and beat up to get the drugs? Lots. And it happens daily across America. Here's the other thing we need to think about. Who are we targeting for this? Most than 75% of the people that are arrested in this country for drugs are African Americans. They're the ones that's locked up in these jails and prisons. Think about the prisons out here. Who owns these privatized jails and prisons? The banks do. They're the ones holding deeds and mortgages to all these places, right? So you get this group of drug addicts, drug dealers in jail now, and guess what? While they're sitting there, they need a way to make some money. So we give them jobs, and we pay them 40 cents an hour, and they make products, and then whoever owns these jails then sells those products for millions of dollars. So now you've got free slavery, basically, 40 cents an hour. This is the things that people don't think about that happens. And again, we're giving people, a lot of kids out there I've seen, there were good kids that get felony records, their lives are destroyed because why? They made a mistake, they took some drugs, they got hooked on them, and they've now ruined their lives. And for what? Why are we doing this? It's absolutely insane. The Achilles heel of the drug war is marijuana. If we legalize marijuana, guess what? You're going to see a use of these other drugs go completely down. They're going to decline. That's what's happened in Portugal. That's what's happened in Amsterdam. That's what's happened in the Netherlands. The crime rate goes down. Your hepatitis goes down. HIV goes down. Your staph infections go down. All by legalizing marijuana. Now, we just want to talk about marijuana for a brief second. Marijuana, your government tells you, it's a Schedule I narcotic, meaning it has high potential for abuse, has no medicinal value, okay, and is dangerous. The same government that tells you that, one agency, which would be the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, that goes around telling everybody this, and you've got this Schedule I narcotic. Guess what? You've got the Department of Health a few streets down the block from these guys, and they're putting on their website that, hey, marijuana is medicinal. We actually have a patent on it, the U.S. government does, 2 patents on the cannabinoids found in marijuana, and it is medicinal. And guess what? On this website you go to, you can find out all the research is being done towards cancer research. THC, the active psychoactive ingredient in marijuana, kills cancer cells. It also, right here in Columbus, Ohio State University has been doing research on how it stops Alzheimer's and the plaques that cause Alzheimer's in one's brain, the inflammation. It works on numerous diseases, okay? And this is all on the Department of Health website. So you're going to ask yourself, why is our government lying to us? Because that's what they're doing. Here we're arresting people, and it's all about money and greed. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry for, guess what, the criminal justice system and the government. Sheriffs don't want to let go of it, and police chiefs don't want to let go of the federal funding for the war on drugs. They want to let go of the power and prestige that they get from it, also from the county government that's funding these agencies and stuff. I mean, that's kind of the gist on the war on drugs and what's going on in this country. So, I'd like to engage everybody in conversation. I'm sure people have got questions out here, so let's just start talking, since we're a small group. I'll go.
I haven't followed all the details in Colorado, but if, in your opinion or opinion of representing Leaf or Normal, if we passed a law, if the whole federal system was based on the law in Colorado, would that be a good solution? Did they get it right? Or is there, if everybody did that and then expand that to the next step, everybody did that for all the other drugs, would your organization go, oh, our job is done here,
I think we would be well on our way to end, yeah.
What would be what have they got wrong that's not quite on the side of...
First, Colorado. For me, here's the biggest part of Colorado and the problem with myself. I don't believe that marijuana should be really regulated, or I should say regulated, but taxed as much as it is. This is a weed. This thing grew for thousands and thousands of years, and people say, well, it's a gateway drug. It's dangerous to our children. Okay, before 1937, thousands of kids lived on farms which grew this stuff. Okay, everything grew everywhere. It grew wild, and people walked by it, and nobody ever had a problem with it until 1937. Isn't that kind of funny? Thousands and thousands of years ago. So there's not that much of a problem. So going back to what you're saying, what's happened in Colorado is they've raised the tax on this stuff so high. I think it's like 15% or more, 25% in some cases. You still let your black markets flourish. So you've still got a black market going on out there. We need to keep the taxes low on this.
So that'd be the same argument.
Industry going.
That'd be the same argument for cigarettes,
Exactly.
if we, okay.
Get the hemp industry going. And there's 50,000 different jobs and products you can create out of hemp. So why not let that industry flourish, and the jobs and the revenue and the products that you're going to be taxing? There's where your tax base will come from. Keep your tax base low on the marijuana. The same with now you talk about heroin and stuff. Obviously, we can make that a Schedule II narcotic. If somebody's hooked on heroin or methamphetamine, we could send them to a doctor. An allotment program can be set up for these folks to go to. And guess what? They can get their drugs free. We can put them in a program to help them wean them off these drugs. It would be a lot better for them going over to a drug dealer and keeping this black market, these terrorists. And that's what you're doing. You're basically funding terrorism in this country when you buy drugs. Does that kind of answer your question?
Well, just like if we had heroin or methamphetamine or something, it wouldn't follow. You couldn't go into Joe's methamphetamine shop.
You're not going to go down to Kroger and buy this stuff. You would probably more or less be regulated and controlled, just like any other drug. You go to your doctor. I've got a heroin problem. I need help. At most, it should be decriminalized.
You treat it like Vicodin.
Yeah. It would be the same as Vicodin, Oxycontin, Percocet, or any of those other drugs. Regulation and control. And guess what? We've already got a system with the DEA built into watching these doctors and seeing what they're doing. We know the problems we have with pill mills and stuff like that. We can control that. Regulation, control, and police those guys. Meanwhile, draining the market of their profit.
That's become a little bit problematic though too, because certain doctors who have to do high maintenance pain medication for people with special disorders are getting in a lot of trouble, and those people can't get the pain medications they need because of how much they're cracking down on opiate-based pain medications.
And again, it comes back to what the question was here to begin with, when we went around the room asking, why does the government care what I put in my body? It should be my right to put whatever I want to, whether it's a piece of pizza or steroids or methamphetamine or heroin or whatever. But in a case like that, it has even with regulation control, we have to break this down to individual basis too. In a case like that, I would think a doctor would say, no, I'm overriding this. This is the special circumstances of why this patient needs more pain medication. Everybody takes in these medications and drugs differently, and our bodies respond differently to them. What can get me high, what may not get you high. It's like alcohol. Some of us can drink 5 or 6 beers, and other people will drink 5 or 6 beers and be flat on the floor. So.
So talk about the black market in Colorado. I mean, how black can it get? I mean, if it's legal, what about, I guess, cultivation for personal use? I mean, are we going to substitute drug crimes for tax crimes? Are people going to be able to grow it and sell it, to some extent on their own?
Well, if they have a license to sell it, yeah, grow it on their own for their own personal use. To me, I don't see what's any different growing marijuana than growing lettuce in your backyard. There's no difference. Basically, marijuana is being classified as a vegetable anyway. So,
but you can sell lettuce without a license.
Well, in some states, Georgia's changing all that around too.
Okay.
You can't sell to your neighbor or give your neighbor without government approval, which is kind of crazy.
So if your neighborhood kid just hops over the fence to this plant and you haven't guarded it somehow, are you responsible when the kids get
I think regulation and control would take that in, where you either grow indoors or else if you're growing outside, put a fence up around it or whatever. I think common sense measures to ensure safety and public safety. And that's the thing with when I'm with the Ohio Rights Group, and that's the one thing we always talk about. You have to do this in a safe for the consumer, the public, and think of I tell our guys, we need to be like pot cops. We need to make sure this is set up right as we go along. Same with normal. We're trying to put ideas out there for people to make sure things are set up and safe for the consumer and the public. Yes.
I'm having a little trouble figuring out just how far you'd like to go with legalization. So you mentioned, physicians prescribing heroin or other opiates for maintenance. But then take crack cocaine. There's more of a binge pattern of use with most users of crack cocaine as opposed to a maintenance pattern of use that you'd have with opiates.
Right.
So would you actually advocate going as far as having crack available at your local Walgreens over the counter? Or what role should it play in society?
Good question. And then we got to think of the synthetic drugs that are out there on the street. We've created, this whole prohibition thing has created all these synthetic drugs. So that's a good question. The main thing is nobody should be arrested for doing drugs, period. What you put on your body is your business, okay? The police were created by a guy named Robert Peel back in the 1800s. The war over in England, this is where Robert Peel, this is where the good guy get bobbies at in London. And Robert's whole thing was, we're here to protect the public from other people doing harm and not to protect people from themselves. You know what, if you want to buy crack, so to speak, and you want to use that, okay, wherever you go to buy it at, guess what, they should be informing you, hey, this is a dangerous substance, you can get addicted to it, whatnot. You should even be able to have maybe even a video to watch on it for your protection. But what you put in your body is your business. It's like, you're in here, you have a right to die when you want to. You should have a right to use the drugs you want to. Yeah.
I had an idea a while back for a regulatory system that would have you get licensed to use different substances the way you get licensed to drive a car.
Right.
Take
So
classes, you take a test,
exactly.
and now you can go buy it whenever you want as long as you're not giving it to unlicensed people.
Crack smoking license.
Yeah.
But why not? I mean, there you go. Now you're setting something up where you've got a safety mechanism in place. If this person wants to go and do this behavior and do these drugs, at least you warned them and showed them in the first place. And if they want to continue to do that, then that's on them. It shouldn't be on us. Okay, and it shouldn't be on law enforcement.
Do you have a sense of, I think it's just large extent you preach to the choir in this group, but do you have a sense, like in the next X number of years, it looks like marijuana legislation may be going through, like Colorado.
I think in 2020 you're going to see marijuana legalized all across the United States in one form or another, whether it's full legalization for recreational use or medicinal. I think after what Colorado's done, they started out projecting they had $700 million worth of sales, $44 million in taxes. Don't you think every state's seeing that and they're going to go for that money?
Yeah.
That's what politicians are about, folks, is money, and they're going after it.
What do you think would be the next, marijuana strikes me as kind of a no-brainer. Of course, we're famous in this country for not having any brains, but but that one at least, the reality is finally sinking in, and then the reality of actual results and tax revenue and whatnot. Probably, marijuana seems like an easier one. Do you see what the next step would be? What would be the next drug that would be easier to, okay, now let's talk about
heroin.
Heroin,
Heroin's
you
already
think?
being talked about. In Canada, I think last year they thought about bringing it back and making it like a Schedule II narcotic for people to use, same as they would Oxycontin, because it works. It's the most strongest pain reliever out there. I had people come into jail that couldn't afford. I talked to this one kid one night. I worked at the jail for 4 years, 6 years on patrol, and I had a guy come in one night, and he says, well, he did heroin. I said, well, why are you on heroin? He said, well, I got a back problem, I can't afford the insurance. And they said, this is the same as me taking Oxycontin. I don't have to pay. I go down here and get it $20 for a hit of it, or $10, as opposed to paying $80 for one Oxycontin at that time. It was a street by $68 on him, so it was cheaper for this guy. And he was legitimate. He had a back problem. So why can't we do that?
Do you see any other drugs that, because it sounds like what you're saying about heroin is that it's effective, it's got a medicinal use that everyone recognizes, or should. Do you see any other, when I think of methamphetamine, I want to go, well, that I wouldn't feel so bad about, Do you see what the next one would be after that, or what would fit in a similar category?
No, I think the next one, well, cocaine would obviously fit in that category too, because it has medical use, especially in surgeries and stuff like that. But let's talk about methamphetamine, because methamphetamine and heroin are the two biggest drugs out here on the street. Methamphetamine, like I said, structure of it is no different than Adderall. Okay, I would rather see somebody going to a doctor, getting that from a doctor. Let's get you off that. Let's try to wean you off that. Put you on maybe like Adderall or something like that to help you wean you off that. As to, here's the danger with methamphetamine: it's highly explosive. You know, you got these. Used to, you had a whole laboratory and you cooked this stuff up. And you had bottles and ether and ammonium nitrate and all these different chemicals to make this. Now we're making them in one bottles. You know, one pot cook method is what they're doing, and to make crystal meth. And now, before I left the sheriff's office, we had a drug bust down there. We walked in a garage and this guy had over 132-liter Coke bottles sitting there, and to blow the whole neighborhood up. We don't want that. You got to have some kind of safety. So this is why you got to take it out of the neighborhoods, out of the garages, put it back on a shelf or to a doctor's office so somebody can go get this stuff. Because there's your problem with it. It's going to, potential for hurting other people's there. But still, yet at the same time, we can't keep arresting people and chasing our tails because there's no way you can stop this madness out here on the street. But the drug enforcement does not work. So, I mean, it's kind of a complex issue, but there's got to be safeties and licensing and things we could do to ensure more safety, kind of like what Rose just spoke about. John will go with you next since you've had your hand up. So.
I was talking to a substance abuse counselor about your program several years ago because we had another person come and gave a talk here. I don't remember how long ago it was, but it seemed to make sense to me what you're saying, that having marijuana be illegal creates it or causes it to be a gateway drug because they go to an illegal source to get that. Where else are there illegal drugs? Right there.
You go to a drug
But
he's got other drugs. Hey,
he was telling me that that how marijuana is done nowadays is very different than how it used to be. That they use blunts and that the compounds are much stronger. And like I say, he's a substance abuse counselor, so it kind of surprised me. He was against legalizing it because he was afraid, especially for younger people, that they would take it believing that it's just a harmless thing, but that it stunts their brain growth, I guess.
I've heard, I'll tell you, on the stunning the brain growth goes back to, I think they say your brain is developing until you're 24 years old. Then it kind of stops. It's developed. It's fully matured. And if you watch the Sanjay Gupta video he did called Weed, he kind of discusses this, and he's got some experts in there to discuss that. After that phase, and all this is, they're still unsure about a lot of this stuff, but the bottom line of it is does it stunt brain growth in teenagers? It may. We're not totally sure on it. After the age of 24, it doesn't really affect the brain much at all. My thing with the younger people using it, if you have a medicinal need for it, regardless, you need to have it. There's kids out there that have seizures and stuff like this that absolutely need it. We all have an endocannabinoid system. We're all producing the same chemicals that are found in marijuana. We have cannabinoid receptors in our bodies. So, I mean, kind of, I don't know if that's answering your question here or not, but as far as, do I think it's harmful? No. And these people that we talk about, the substance abuse counselors and stuff, every one of these folks that tell you that it's bad, they're all getting paid to say that. That's their job. That's their livelihood. Just like the sheriff I worked for. Being law enforcement,
well, I think he's an independent. Would you say that for an independent?
No, he may be right. I mean, about some of his.
I don't know him well, so you're free to say he's wrong.
Here's my experience. Okay, if you go back and look at the Rastafarians, usually the kids start smoking pot around the age of 12. Okay, it's part of their religious beliefs, and it's a sacrament, and they start at the age of 12 and on up. And what you find on these islands, and there's been studies on it with Jamaica and over in the Caribbean, it hasn't really no effect on anybody. It really doesn't harm them in the long run. And I can't, here's my problem with it. If your body produces this stuff, okay, and produces the same chemicals, so your body's already producing, how can it hurt your body and your brain? Your brain's actually producing a lot of these chemicals right out of your brain. Now, I'll give you an example. Women who get pregnant, not everyone does this because we all have an endocannabinoid system. Some of us, or a third of the population, is cannabinoid deficient. But women, when they're pregnant, can pass through their breast milk to their babies cannabinoids, and that baby will show positive on a drug test for THC. Never smoked a joint, never been injected with marijuana. Same with the mother. So your body's producing it. So my thought is behind this, and there's a lot of other people have talked about the subject, that that's nonsense. They don't really believe it. But there may be some science behind it. But I think it's an individual choice whether somebody wants to do that. And I think if you educate kids early enough about all this stuff, I think what we're finding in the countries that have legalized marijuana, fewer kids are using it or even want to even use it because they understand it's real medicine. It's time for that. Yes, ma'am.
This might kind of go along with what we're talking about now, but my son lives in Berkeley, California, and there are some really nice high schools there. One has a really mixed population, one is a very liberal, and another one a little more conservative. There are three there. But my son is sending my grandson to a Catholic private school because he's afraid of drugs. And so, I don't know, what do you think about that? I'd like to just see my grandchild just go to one of the public schools.
Here's the problem with dare groups and all this kind of stuff. They don't work. They found that when they started back in, I think 79 or 80, 50% of kids that smoke pot or use some kind of drug in high school. You go 30 years on, 40 years down the line here, and we're finding, guess what, it's the same number. So that their programs haven't worked. Why? Because they're not realistic. You want to be realistic? Hey, have a class, teach these kids what really goes into methamphetamine and making it. They won't want to use it. When they see ethers in it and battery acid and all this other stuff that you're putting in your body and how it harms your body, what it does to your body, and then, hey, take those same kids to the county morgue and let them see some dead bodies laying up there. I guarantee you, that'll turn them off from using drugs. Okay?
Yeah.
And be honest with them about marijuana. Why lie to them?
Cigarettes,
It's not
exactly.
that.
Once we found out what was considered
It's not.
formaldehyde.
Okay, it's a real medicine the body's producing, and I think if you really educate kids properly, you're going to see a decline. And it's the same with, and here I'm going to get on this subject just for a second, off the subject, but just like gun control. Okay, and guns in schools, you got all this thing with guns in school. Why not teach a kid how to use a gun in school? Educate them to the safety and the harms of a gun. Okay, but we don't have that. Oh, we want to ban guns in schools. We want to talk about them. You can't mention them. Have a safety class. Okay, and then you're going to see a lot of kids not being killed with guns, basically.
But what if they don't teach that type of classes? Like, let's see, my grandson goes to this high school, and there are drug problems in the high school, and they don't teach these classes. He worries about my grandson, and
Then that's the part where groups like your group here, all of us in this room, my group, the normal group I work with, need to strive for drug education, proper drug education in the schools, and stay on these drugs with these school administrators to make it happen. A realistic approach. Let's get rid of these stupid dare programs and come up with a real program that really works. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the best answer I can give on that one. So, yes, ma'am.
I don't think that educating kids about the dangers of things like methamphetamines would stop them from using them, because we educate and try to educate them about all the dangers of cigarettes, and you can show them pictures of people's lungs when they've died from lung cancer, and then I see all these young kids smoking cigarettes on the street.
You know what? We can educate
Doesn't stop
but
them.
we can't stop them from their own stupidity and ignorance. Once you've taught somebody something. When I was a kid, I knew from all the cop shows that were on back in the 70s, if you watch Kojak or Starsky and Hutch or any of those shows, you always seen a junkie on TV. Okay? And it wasn't a glamorous. They weren't depicted as being a glamorous thing, being a junkie. So, and I was educated and had drug education when I went to school as a kid. Okay? And the people I went to school with who did drugs, guess what? They were educated and sat right beside me in these classes, so they knew better. They wanted to try it. They wanted to be the weekend warrior, so to speak. A few of them got hooked on it. That's their own stupidity and ignorance. We can't, as a society, hold everybody back because a few can't, do the right thing with these things.
Well, and we have like the lowest smoking rates in history, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about that when you asked that. We have one of the lowest smoking rates in history. I'll tell you what, back in the 1920s, when you think about, or 1930s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, we had a numbers racket in this country, right? We legalized and got rid of the racketeering in this country. We created what we call the lottery system. And guess what? We got rid of the violence. We got the kids out from delivering all these numbers for these bookies, and we got rid of the violence and the murders and everything that's associated with that stuff too, because we got a lottery now. Do we still have gambling addictions? Yes, we do. But that's for who? The mental health professional, not law enforcement. We got law enforcement out of that aspect, so it still exists in small, but not like it did back then. Okay, somebody's different. I'll come back. I'll go to I'll go to
Sure, and then over there.
Okay.
I just wanted to respond briefly to John's chemical dependency counsel friend. I feel like your friend was missing an important point about the pot. So, and pot being stronger than it used to be. So, this may shock and horrify some people, but I've smoked pot before. Probably, I'm going to take a wild guess. I'm not the only one in this room to whom that also
Might be
applies.
correct.
It's just a wild guess. So, for those who drink alcohol, just think, if you like drinking a 12-ounce glass of beer, would you drink a 12-ounce glass of vodka and expect the same effect? Probably you would use less to get the effect that you like. Perhaps, an ounce and a half shot if you want the same effect. So similarly, if people smoke more powerful cannabis, they smoke less.
Yeah.
It's not
Do
going to
they
do
actual?
something.
Because
Yes.
I mean, with soda,
Ask
you give people a big bucket of soda in a theater, and they tend to drink it all.
Ask any pot smoker, including some who have used much more than I ever did, and you think you find pretty consistently that people smoke the pot until they get the effect that they want, and that means that if it's strong, they use less of it.
I got to agree with you on that one.
Oh, sure.
And as far as the strength, you always hear this, and I've heard it over and over again. Well, marijuana's stronger than it used to be in the 1970s. Well, it's because you had a black market for the last 70-some years. Guess what? Go back to your biblical days, 2,000 years ago, and the marijuana was just as strong then as it is now. But, the only difference when you take that seed and put it in the ground is the nutrients you put to it. I can take any seed, you can take any seed, anybody in this room, and grow that stuff, put the right nutrients to it, and grow super pop that's got 36% THC. That'll vary depending on the genetics of the plant, okay? But you're going to have at least 20% if you grow it right. The reason it was such low THC levels because it was guerrilla grown, and we got the government looking for it, so we get some off big cornfields where they plant this stuff at, or out in the woods, and you go back to it every so often so they can't get seen, and they don't take all the nutrients and fertilizers they need. But any good soil, guess what? You're going to grow super dope, the same that you had 2,000 years ago.
This kind of ties into, I think, my biggest issue with the thought of legalizing and regulating all drugs is that things like opioids, you're not going to get someone who uses less to get the same result because the human body adapts to that, and they're always seeking that feeling and using more. So while I like the idea of having someone who wants to, be able to live a normal life with this addiction that they have, or maybe seek a cure, I don't think that regulation is going to shut down the black or gray markets the way that it would for maybe something like pot, where people are much more self-regulating. Because we already have issues with Adderall being sold. We already have issues with OxyContin being sold through illegal channels, even though they're obtained legally.
Right.
And I'm just having a hard time picturing how that would be solved with other similar drugs categorized the same way.
Here's one thing you got to think about with that. I agree with what you're saying. You're never going to get rid of the black markets completely. The idea is to quit funding the terrorists, the drug cartels, and the street gangs out here. For the most part, what I've experienced with people who have a slight back problem and get a month's supply of opiates and then turn around and sell half of them is they're selling to somebody else that also has that problem, doesn't have insurance or whatnot. But on that level, guess what? That money's not going back to fund terrorism. It's going back to that individual to live on. Okay? And a lot of people who have low income and are on disabilities and stuff do this to supplement their incomes. Okay? So, yeah, you got a black market, but it's a different black market that's not lined with terrorism and violence and all that. So, you almost got to pick the worst of the two evils.
I see what you're saying about like the small sellers, but I
Right.
also think that we as people are incredibly creative and greedy.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's why we're in
I
this
think
spot to
I think
begin
my
with.
thought would be then, you know, okay, well we've got black markets right now, they're just gonna change strategies. And, you know, those drug cartels and those terrorists are gonna get more creative and figure out ways around it. So in my head I'm having a hard, I want to believe, right, that it'll work, but I'm skeptical that it would actually work.
Well, the statistics have shown it does work. In countries like the Netherlands and Amsterdam and Portugal, I think we've got another, I forget, Uruguay's now legalized marijuana overall. You're still going to have some of these problems, but I think we're going to lessen our problems. That's what the statistics have shown.
And the users aren't going to jail.
And users
Oh, no,
are
no,
going to
I
jail.
know.
I don't
All
want,
for that.
that's my main thing. I don't want to see people get arrested for this stuff anymore. This is absolutely absurd. I mean, if we got somebody who's, well, take alcohol. If you got an alcoholic, unless they drove drunk on the road and created some kind of problem out there, do we arrest them and put them in jail? No. We leave it up to them and their doctor to get treatment. We don't, but guess what? If I still work, we come across a kid with heroin, the first thing we do is go ahead and charge them with the heroin because they're in possession. That's stupid. If we don't, I like full legalization because decriminalization, all it does is leave the black market still playing. That's what we did. We decriminalized alcohol in the 1920s, and guess what? We still had Al Capone and his guys doing their thing. You know, it was decriminalized because the user didn't get arrested for it, but the bootlegger did. So the black market still flourished. But I think we can, I mean, we're in a room of thinkers here, right? We can come up with a solution to this. But we've got to get out of this arresting people and putting them in jail for this and destroying lives, because it's what we're doing.
And I want to speak to what you said a little bit about people self-regulating with opiates, is that a lot of our conception of opiate addiction right now, like the harms that we associate with it, are actually harms brought on by prohibition and not by the addiction itself. In Portugal, where they have started maintenance programs, they only try to wean people off if they ask for that. Otherwise, they maintain their addiction medically. And they're seeing that these people that they maintain can start supporting families, can start living normal lives, just like you have functional alcoholics. The harms of being addicted to these substances is not as intense as people think they are if they were absent a system where it stigmatized and criminalized these people.
And encourage them to mix the heroin with whatever
Right.
bathroom cleaners they decide that they want to use.
And they're wasting time finding ways to get the money to buy this.
Exactly. That's
Where
why
they
you
can
have
be productive
crime right
members
now.
of.
You know, I told a kid one day, and this heroin addict I was talking to, he said, "Hey, you know, if marijuana was legal, I could smoke it. I never got into doing the heroin, and that was kind of BS. He was feeding me too, but it was halfway truth the way he was telling me. But the other thing I said to him, I said, look, if you want to do heroin, that's up to you. If you got a truckload of it and it's for your use, I mean, I'm not going to be able to stop you. That's your thing. But when you go out here and start breaking into people's houses and stealing their stuff, your ass is going to jail. That's just what I told him. And you want to deal it to somebody else, your butt's going to jail. You know, and that's the way it should be. You know, we can't stop this. I mean, the government, the Attorney General just put a heroin task force together, and I had a lady that I've been working with and trying to help her daughter. Her daughter died of a heroin overdose, and she helped orchestrate this heroin task force. And she asked me, "What do you think?" I said, "It's the Band-Aid on the problem." I said, "There's no way the state Attorney General can get enough police officers together to fight the Mexican cartel, and that's who you're fighting. You can arrest them all day long. Guess what? We got plenty of them sitting down on the border ready to come across and sell drugs." And another thing, if y'all seen the thing about all the kids last summer sitting on the border, why are these kids running from these countries? The drug cartels. That's why they're sitting down here on the borders. That's not mentioned on TV. It's because of the drug war and what's going on in these countries, forcing these kids and their families into the drug trade, moving this stuff into the United States. That's why these kids are down there on the border running from their homes and want to be in this country. Yeah.
One thing I was going to mention a while back about the education thing, if you look at something like, you can't prevent people from doing the stupid things. I mean, one example of that is that new crocodile stuff.
Right.
That's all over the internet, what it does and how badly it can harm someone, but people are still using it because they're addicted and either can't get access to heroin or can't afford it because it's even cheaper.
Right.
And it's far more dangerous. But also, when you look at the effects of education, you have things like, cigarette use has declined sharply since there's been more education about its effects and what it does. Drunk driving fatalities have gone down considerably. Enforcement might be part of that, but education has become much more prominent in the last 20 years, and it's declined sharply. And including smoking youth, there's far less young people smoking cigarettes than there used to be.
Exactly, about 50%.
People are still going to do that. It's not going to stop. I mean, even after drug prohibition ended, alcohol prohibition ended, there were still people selling, alcohol illegally. I'm related to some.
Tax guys.
Moonshine and whatnot.
Right.
But the thing is, it's still, private individuals. You didn't have large crime networks
Exactly.
running the whole thing because the profitability goes down if there's legal channels. It's, computer piracy actually has declined somewhat. It's hard to get estimates on that since you had things like iTunes and Netflix and other legal channels to get the shows you want to watch and the movies you want to watch online legally for just chump change, basically, as opposed to only being able to buy a physical copy. And when the movie industries and the TV industries start coming on board with that more and more, the money they've lost from piracy has actually declined because there was a legal channel.
Right.
You're making it accessible, where it's convenient.
And here's another thing that I haven't mentioned, but just think about steroids. Why are we banning steroids? Why? Why from all these ways? You think in the last 40 years since the 1960s, how many world records do you think it's been set by Olympic athletes without the use of steroids? I'm going to tell you right now, 0. They're all using steroids. Every bodybuilder in this country is using steroids. You can't build muscle mass without that. And if you want to put that stuff in your body and grow your muscles, why shouldn't you? If you go to a sporting event, say a baseball game, to see somebody hit 5 balls all there, you want to see them knock that ball out of the stadium. You want to see the super athletes knock it in. The only way they can do that nowadays is with steroids. And yet, steroids are so bad and so dangerous, and you hear this stuff over and over again, but guess what? Every hospital out here, everybody's on steroids. It's in the hospital. Yeah, do they have side effects? Sure, they've got a few side effects. But again, it comes back to your freedom of choice. You do with your body what you want to do with it. So,
Just you kind of segued almost into, I want to make a comment on seems to me one of the best arguments that you have is no matter how much money we have available for law enforcement, there's a limit to that.
right.
And it seems to me that the largest stupidity, the most stupid aspect of prohibition is the misallocation of limited resources. And so if we all agree that maybe my next door neighbor shouldn't be able to give Vicodin, to my nephew, my minor nephew, then if law enforcement isn't running around rounding up all these other people and devoting our limited jail space to someone whose crime is only against themselves, instead, and I'm a big fan of law and order, let's go after the people who are getting drugs that will harm our children. Let's go after them, but we can't do that because we're busy out doing a wild goose chase.
We're doing exactly. I'll go back to what I said when I started this. When I started Fairfield County Sheriff's Office, working in the jail, 12 to 15. In the 10-year span that I've been there, we have 80 to 90 women. Okay? The idea was we have such, and this goes with the men population too. Can't remember the numbers, but I think the most staggering was the women because it shot up so much. I was like, whoa! And here's the thing that gets me, and it goes back to just what you said. So we got this jail overcrowding issue. We're spending $2 million a year to send people out at $1 million to $2 million a year, send people to other county jails to house them while they're waiting to go through the court system and all this stuff. And so you're paying these other counties, and the sheriff's sitting there, hey, we need to build another jail. You know, we need to build another jail. Well, then all of a sudden, there was a jail, the prison out there, the jail, they sold us a building basically, so we could use for a jail annex. All this fixes the problem. We don't have to send people out of county anymore, so we'll send them out the annex. So we send them out the annex. Oh, well, the population numbers kind of even out there. We're not sending anybody out of county. We're saving the money. But then we're going to guess what we're going to do. We're going to create a drug interdiction unit, and we're going to go out here and start arresting people again. And this drug interdiction unit, first summer, it's just tearing it up. They got 90 to 100 people on felony charges cooking all this meth and stuff. So I pull up the sergeants over the jail one day. She had some paperwork for me. I said, let me ask you a question. She goes, what? I said, are you shipping anybody out of county after this drug interdiction unit? Yeah, we're back to shipping out of county and chasing your tail. It doesn't work. Why are you doing this? So the solution to get those bigger drug dealers is in prohibition. It's that simple.
By the way, I was in Fairfield County last night, and I turned it down because I had to drive, but moonshine goes for $30.
Yeah, there's still moonshiners out there. Yeah, really, they're all.
$30 for mason jar.
And they don't teach you about that in school, do they?
I wanted to make a comment about the education, what Jamie was saying and a few others about smoking. And because I don't think it's education in terms of like announcements put on TV. I think it's probably more things like the American Lung Association trying to get people to donate money to fight lung cancer, which is not a direct statement. It's implicit. And I think people will listen to that a lot more. And then also just some cultural changes. You know, people are trying to be healthier, and you know, there's been some exercise crazes that have come and gone. So I think maybe people pay more attention to that and smoking less.
I just think education's the way to go. As far as drug addictions, education and family, and having a good doctor, basically, good medical system that it looks at this and does the right thing with it. Yes.
And a further thought about that smoking, using smoking as a parallel or potential. Before the 60s or 70s, I'd even say smoking was healthy. Doctors, 9 out of 10 doctors agreed. Smoking is good for you. The ads had doctors on them. I mean, it was just a whole delusional state. And also the early ads, or anti-pot ads in the 50s and 60s showed people crazy, just acting super crazy on pot. And they're gonna go kill you, and it's like, I mean, I may have smoked pot in the past, and I'm not going to hurt nobody when I'm stoned. I'm not, you know, and I'm going to be the safest driver you could possibly imagine because I'm going 10 miles an hour at the line.
And you know what? That's the statistics that show that, because when you smoke weed, guess what? You're more intent, you're more concentrated, you have more control. Okay, when you're driving down that road, and you know, racism played into this back in the day. So did greed. Marijuana became illegal in this country basically because of Mr. Hearst and Mr. DuPont and Mr. Millen, who was their banker. And he had a son-in-law named Harry Inslee, who was head of the Federal Narcotics Bureau. Then you throw all the racism at that time. Then we had a problem with the Mexicans in the Dust Bowl, and we had a problem with all the blacks. And then, you know, that's what happened. The racism, hey, these jazz musicians, these jazz clubs, they're going to get white women and rape them. I'm like, really? And you bought this, Congress bought this argument. And Inslee, or Hearst, he put this in all of his newspapers. He wanted to sell his logging industry and his paper mills and stuff. Instead of using hemp for it, he wanted to use logs for it. So we start cutting down all these your woods and your forests and stuff to make. And then DuPont had nylon and radon. Well, guess what? That's why he got rid of the hemp industry, so he could do the synthetic plastics and all this stuff.
We'll do about 2 more questions for Mr. McDermott.
I just wanted to mention, since it hasn't been mentioned, the book Chasing the Screen. Chasing the Screen. It just really speaks to all of this, and I really recommend it. I just read it recently, and it's also really goes well into the history of the drug war, especially a lot of it, Billie Holiday. I mean, she was basically murdered by the drug war.
Right.
She was targeted by Ansling and these guys.
Oh yeah, I mean he destroyed millions of people's lives. He really
Yeah,
did.
and you know, it's well worth reading, and you know, it talks about a lot of statistics, but it's easy to get through, and even J. Edgar Hoover and these people, they were users in the end. I mean,
Oh yeah.
and this all back in the McCarthy era.
Speaking of books, and I'll do this since we're running out of time here. A couple books to look at. You want to know about marijuana, and this is called The Emperor Wears No Clothes. It's by Jack Hare. Jack died here a couple of years ago, but he offered $100,000 to anybody who could disprove anything in his book. And yet, and that book was first came out about 1980, I believe. And ever since then, no one has ever been able to disprove anything he said about marijuana in this book. This is really the Bible of marijuana if you really want to know about the history of marijuana and all its different uses and through the hemp industry, all the different products you get out of it. Great read. Now, since we're in the Humanist organization, I brought this one, Marijuana in the Bible. Okay, why did I bring this in here and I suggest you read this? I'll tell you why. Because marijuana is in every religion out there, from Hinduism to Christianity, Judaism, all of them. It's right here if you want to know about it. Guess what? Christianity, as people know it today, is not the way it was practiced 2,000 years ago. This is not only this book, there's several books, there's actually college courses out there now. You've got Dr. Hillman, Dr. Aldridge, you've got Dr. Ruck. Chris Bennett's read several books on this thing. He's probably the leading expert in the world on the uses of marijuana in religion. Basically, shamanic practices going back thousands of years using drugs. Drugs, more drugs. So, very good reading for anybody wanting to see the other side of Christianity, the side that you don't see. And you'll be surprised. When you read this, go out and pick up a Bible and look at the side and you're going, whoa! Why is this being taught in the churches? Why are these ministers against marijuana? Well, I'm telling you, God's holding the sacrament and they don't even realize it. The next thing I left y'all on the tables here is a little card from Normal. It's got some facts on there about marijuana and stuff. I can pass these out to everybody. Take them, pass them around, and just keep them in your wallets for to refer to if anybody ever getting a conversation about marijuana. It's a cool little factoid card, basically. I am the president of the Central Ohio Normal chapter. If anybody would like to join, we're going to have meetings just to kind of tune into us online. We'll be posting those for upcoming events. The last thing, least, is this is LEAP. This is a membership for LEAP. If you'd like to join, believe in what I've talked about today, this is a call to action. If you sign up and join LEAP today, give me these back, fill these out. I'll give you a little LEAP badge. You'll have your little cop badge there. It says LEAP on it. But basically what this is for is not to harass you with. You become a member of LEAP when you sign up with this. But basically all we're doing, this is your call to action, because our numbers tell our representatives in Congress that you agree with us. And that's basically what this is for, is to take and show them, hey, these are our members. This is what they believe in, okay? And they believe the war on drugs needs to come to an end. So I highly recommend that you guys fill this out. Nobody's going to harass you for money or email you to death or anything like that. Basically, when I first joined, before I became a LEAP speaker, I'd hear about it quarterly. It's in a quarterly newsletter via email of what had been happening throughout the week. Again, they do not harass you or bother you. But basically, all this is signing this thing up or just letting Congress know that you think the war on drugs needs to be. So,
why the two groups?
Why the two groups? Normal is an advocacy group for marijuana. It's a national organization for the reform of marijuana laws. And basically, I joined it as to support. It supports the whole idea and concept. Basically, we feel that marijuana is going to be our Achilles heel being the drug. If we get marijuana legalized, people are going to finally sit back and say, hey, these other drugs, this is stupid too. We need to quit arresting people for them and start, kind of concentrate on the human side of it and get people the help they need and not quit arresting them just on lives, basically.
So let's once again thank Carlis McDerment for joining us.
Thank you guys.